What is up, guys? Welcome back to the channel. My name is Travis. Of course, this is TW Motorsports, and today, yes, we are going to be lowering the Yukon just a little bit more in the front, and we're going to be doing that for a couple reasons. So first off, if you guys did not catch the video, yes, this thing is dropped about a two in the front with spindles, 4.5 probably in the back with springs, and I'll try to list that video up above here. But when I originally did that, I bought a couple different parts. I bought obviously the springs for the back, but the front, there was a couple different options, and one of which is the spindle, which I ended up putting in, but the other one are these drop cups from Mcgaughys. And so kind of how these work, guys, is they go over the factory strut, and the spring sets lower, giving you up to a 2-inch drop. If you put none of these spacers in, you get a 2-inch. One spacer, you get 1.5 inches. Two spacers, you get 1-inch drop, or at least that's what they say. Now, it also says, just so you guys are fair warned, that they only work on 2-wheel drives. Now, the 2-wheel drive strut and the 4-wheel drive strut are the exact same. So I know it's going to work on the strut. My question is it going to interfere with the CV shaft? Will there be any interference in there? So you guys are going to find out with me here, and if it doesn't work, it doesn't work. But the other reason I want to do this is because the upper ball joints, when I did that, were kind of weak in my opinion. So I've got 2 new A-arms there. I'm going to be putting 2 upper A-arms in. I'm going to test or check the bottom ones to see how much play they have in them. If there's any play up and down, obviously I'm going to have to press those out. I do not have those here because I think they were okay. Also going to check out the tie rod ends, making sure that they're good. But either way, I wanted to replace those uppers. This is a good time to do it all. And I've been sitting here looking at this thing because it's obviously dirty and nasty, but we've been driving it a lot. And I come out and look at it, and the back is lower. And that makes me absolutely nuts. The back is about 33.5, I believe, from the ground, and don't quote me on that. And the front, I believe, is 33 and like 15/16. So it's about a 1/2 inch higher in the front. And I think a lot of that is the spring has settled in the back. But I want a 1/2 inch rake towards the front. That is how I like my vehicles to look. For a couple reasons. When they're dead level, they always look lower in the back. And with the roof line on this thing tapering off, it's always going to look that way too. So even if we have it a 1/2 inch to 1 inch lower in the front, it should look more level for the most part. So that is the goal today, guys. So let's get this thing off the ground. We're gonna get the wheels off. I won't show you guys that, but then we'll dig in and see exactly what we can get accomplished. Now that we got the wheel off, we are gonna go ahead and remove a couple clips. The first one being this guy right here. I'm just gonna try to use a flathead screwdriver. Kind of bear with me, guys. It is cold out here right now in my shop. I got the heater running, but it's 8 degrees outside. So anyway, we're gonna undo that. We're gonna get this guy out of here. I'm using my little clip tools, hopefully. There we go. And then we're gonna unplug this. There's a little lock in it. If you just push on the red, it should come unlocked. There we go. And then we can unplug it and get it out of the way over here. Now, the next thing I'm gonna do is there's a 10mm on top of this A-arm. We're gonna take it off, kind of get this brake line over here. Same way with the one on top of the spindle. And then, guys, generally what I do is I thread those back in so we know where they're at. And you can see we have this little guy here. We may end up unhooking that eventually, but for now I'm gonna leave it in place. I think I can work around it, or at least I'm gonna hope. So once we get that loose, I am gonna go ahead, if you guys are doing this without an impact, I'm gonna go ahead and take this 35, or I think it's a 36mm actually, out of the center of the axle. My impact should do that relatively easy, but if not, you're gonna have to put the wheel on, take the center cap off, and loosen this off the truck, which kind of sucks, but yeah, we're gonna go ahead and get that out of the way. Now, I said my impact will take it off, hopefully it will. And it did. And there is a little washer back behind that. Make sure you grab it too. Sometimes you have to get a magnet. The other thing, guys, is I'm going to be going back and forth doing both sides at the same time, so it's going to be identical on either side, but I just want to let you guys know that that is what I'm going to be doing. So next we're going to go ahead and grab the brakes. I think they're 18s and 19s if I remember correctly, so I'm going to go grab that and we'll get the brake, actual caliper and rotor out of the way. Now if possible, I'm going to try to get, this is a 19 up top here, I'm going to try to use my impact on these, but sometimes that doesn't work out. We're able to get those out. Now your caliper should be loose. We may have to work on it to get it off here. I'm gonna have to grab a pry bar actually. I think I set one here. We could take all it off at one time. That's probably what I should have done, but holy cow, that thing's on there tight. There we go. You can see the backing plate came off of that. I'm gonna have to press those pistons in when we go back together. That's like seized actually. Look at that. All right, so I've got something right here, which is actually an extra jack stand to set this on while we're doing all this work. So now we can go ahead and grab our caliper bracket out, which should be an 18 millimeter. And it is. That may be a little tougher to get out. We'll see. Yeah, that top one we're gonna have to break off with a breaker bar. Apparently we're gonna have to do the bottom the same way. So I'm gonna go grab a breakover bar, break them loose, then we'll spin them the rest of the way out. I must have been really strong when I did that. Normally my impact, if I could get a straight on shot there, make pretty quick work of it, but since I'm using that swivel, it's not working very well. So we'll get that out of the way, and then I think we need a T30 to get this guy off the center of the rotor. It is a T30. That's not very tight. That's good. You know, I did have this apart, obviously, to do all this drop before, but I was afraid I'd get too low in the front if I put these in before. And then, like I said, I didn't have the uppers to do that. So at this point, we got the brakes all apart. Now we need to work on probably getting the tie rod end loose. I think is what we'll work on next. And then probably the upper and lower ball joints, if I had to guess. And then I tell you what, before we do any of that, we need to go to both sides and get the sway bar loose. So you see the sway bar end length should be a 15 on the top and the bottom. Let's get it loose first, actually. Pretty quick work of that. And we may, those don't look terrible. I'm gonna say we may try to address that, but when I say that, like maybe clean up the inside. The other thing I was gonna tell you guys, when I got this thing aligned, when I lowered it originally, the alignment shop said that my upper A-arm bolts were seized up, and so that's kind of alarming because they shouldn't be, honestly. And so I want to clean those up when we get them out as well. So I'll just add that to the mix. The bushings still seem to be good. I will tell you guys that we need to loosen this on both sides in order to get the drop that we want. So I am going to go ahead, go to the other side and take the sway bar end link out of that, and then we'll come back over and keep going. Now that the sway bar is loose on the other side, I'm going to go ahead and take a 21. We're going to drop that off. And then we need to, I can go ahead and take the 15s out, which I think I will, of the strut itself. So 2 15s that come up from the bottom. But actually, I'll tell you what, before we do that, there is an 18 right here, and it's really close because we lowered this, remember? And we had to shave some of that upper ball joint off. But we should be able to loosen it all the way down until it's touching that boot. That's what we want to do. Want some slack here. So it's touching the boot now. I'm going to take a hammer. Still pretty tight. I'm also going to hit this area where we took the tie rod loose. I'm gonna have to move the camera. Anyway, we're gonna strike these until they loosen up. So I was able to get both those loose, and so I'm gonna thread this off by hand. And it's a tough, this is a tight fit, guys. Really tight fit. The other thing I'm gonna do is I need to release. I need to go ahead and get that spring loose, or the strut, the bottom of the strut loose. So let's take a 15 and get the bottom of it loose. That should drop us out of that upper ball joint. Now we should be able to push this down, and then I'm gonna move this up and down. That bottom ball joint's good. So I'm not even going to loosen the bottom ball joint here, because everything that we need at this point is the A-arm and the strut itself. Now, what we could do is we could fight pushing this back and trying to unplug everything and getting to the bolts or getting under the hood. But what I like to do instead is generally a set of 7mm and a T15, I believe. We could take this inner fender liner out. Yeah, T15. So T15's mainly in the back and on the middle. Ledge up front of this is 7mm, and then there's 2 10s under the very bottom. So I'm gonna take the liner out because instead of fighting with it, it's just much easier to just get it out of the way. Now just look at how much junk we have that I don't know that we'd ever, I mean, I guess if you wanted to fight it, you could get to it with the liner in place, but look, about 10 screws and you're gonna save a ton of time here. But because this is a mag ride, you have a plug that comes out of the top of the actual shock. That's this guy right here. And whoever, I'm guessing they did not take the liner out, although it is missing some screws, but this right here, we need to separate from this little clip, if possible. There we go. So that's the middle of the strut, which you'll see when I pull it out. The only other thing we need to do is we need to pop these guys off that sit on the 18mm that we need to get out of place. Now you can kind of see, hopefully, the center of the strut. But anyway, you can do this a couple ways. You can pop the hood and you can reach under and try to use an 18 on an impact. That is way too tight. You know, I told you guys that these have been replaced before. Right before I bought this, they replaced the front struts. And I'm assuming they just run everything down with an impact. That's entirely too tight. I also noticed that the spring doesn't line up. It should be, the opening of the spring should be right here as well. So I'm hoping when I get it aligned correctly, it doesn't drop it even more, but if so, we'll have to take it back apart. So once we get these 3/18s out, that is way too tight. Oh my gosh. These are supposed to be like, I want to say 18 foot-pounds. That's like 100. Anyway, once we get these loose, we'll thread this out of the bottom and have it out of the way. I'll kind of show it to you over to the side in just a second. You can see we got the strut out. It comes out in that opening down below. Kind of go the bottom that way, comes out. Make sure that you don't get this caught on anything. We don't want it to break, but it is out. And for the most part, we're finished, other than we do need to mark. So you can see where our alignment is set. I want to get a paint pen and mark where the dowel lines up with that eccentric before I pop those out, because remember, we are replacing the upper A-arms. Look at this ball joint. It has some movement up and down. I know it's kind of hard to tell on camera, but it does have some movement up and down. The bottom ones seem solid, so we're going to leave those. The tie rod ends seem solid, we're going to leave those. But I'm going to go ahead and mark these. I'll try to show you once I mark them what I'm talking about, and then we can get a 22, I believe, and knock these things out. So hopefully you guys can see my marks. I got a white mark on all of these where those eccentrics line up. That one's the best one. All 4 of them. So now we're going to take a 20, I don't know why I just did that. We're going to take a 21 millimeter, and it's actually 21, not 22, and we're going to loosen this thing up and see if we can drag this A-arm out. Now, if you got enough room, I'm going to try to take them off with the impact. I don't think I have enough room though. Maybe I do. I want to take them out and set them basically corresponding to the way they went on. Obviously, we're going to keep the fronts with the front. So we're going to take this eccentric off. You can see my mark on it now. And we're going to set this one towards the front because it belongs to the front. And I'm not really sure why they had issues. These bolts actually look pretty good. I'm still going to clean the bolts up a little bit, but they seem to turn pretty free. Anyway, set this one towards the front with everything in the same way it came apart. Same thing with the back here. Okay. Should be loose here. Same thing, taking it out, putting it back together. Yeah, those looks like they sprayed. Something's been sprayed on that. Maybe that was something that they did. Interesting. Anyway, so set those aside, and now we should be able to pull our A-arm out. And I like to kind of pull it out. Let's see here, and kind of bend these little tabs. I like to stick it kind of back in there and then kind of bend the tabs back and forth. A lot of times your new one doesn't like to go in. So there it is, our A-arm is out. Let's, I'm gonna grab a towel, kind of clean up that area in there. It's kind of gross on the inside, and then we'll grab our new one. Now I got the pockets somewhat cleaned out, and you know, look, it's probably not necessary, but there was just a bunch of junk in there. So now I'm gonna go ahead, same thing here. This probably isn't necessary, but I like to put a little bit of grease on this. Just using axle grease like that I would pack wheel bearings with. And then we can get this thing back in place and attempt to, we don't really have to line it up at this point, but we are gonna have to trim some of that ball joint off. I know we're putting new ball joints off, but if you don't, it's gonna hit the CV shaft. So let's see if we can get this thing in here. This is what I'm talking about. You know, they're kind of a pain to get started, but once you get them in there, it's not too bad. Let's see if we can wipe this grease off my hand. I know you guys, if you watch this channel, you know that I hate having grease on my gloves even. It just makes me crazy. So I'm gonna go out and just scrub. I'm gonna scrub off each one of these bolts. I'm really confused at why they said they had trouble moving them, because they really look good. But either way, I'm gonna take a wire brush, clean these off, and then we're gonna put them back in. So this is the front one. Remember putting them in the same way we took them out. Well, I got them cleaned off a little bit. Like I said, there wasn't really anything on them. I may have to go get my rubber mallet though, because I need to knock this arm down just a little bit. Let me go grab my rubber arm. We'll tap down on this side, see if we can get this started. One other thing I forgot to tell you guys, these arms are side specific, so make sure you get the right arm on the right side. Lining up your old one as a guide is a good idea. Let's see if we can. And like I said, guys, do not worry about getting our marks lined up right now. That does not matter, because we're gonna have to do that when we get a little weight on it. Now, we may snug them up here after a while, but for now, don't worry about them. Just get the bolts in. You can see that whatever's been on this one, I couldn't even get it to scrub off. At this point, we'll go work on the strut and see if we can actually get the whole reason for this video. Well, I say the whole reason for this video, but we're gonna try them. Let's take that strut apart. At this point, what we're gonna need to do is we need to compress this spring, because we gotta take it off in order to get this cup off. This is what we're gonna be replacing, this spring cup down at the bottom. And so what I'm gonna do is I've got some strut compressor tools here. We're gonna get those in place. And guys, if you don't have a set of these, it would be to your advantage to get some. They make a better set than what I have. I'm thinking about upgrading mine, honestly, just because they make a way nicer set now that does a little better job. We shouldn't have to get all the way up the spring. I know that one fell off, but I like to come up. This is why I'd like to get these newer ones, because they're flat. So we got that one. Let's get this one on here. You try to space them out equally. And so what we're gonna do is we're gonna hammer down on these until the spring is somewhat compressed and pulling away from either the top or the bottom. You can see I'm running into this top up here. I'm gonna switch sides. You kind of gotta go back and forth. I think I'm about to get it there. This one is tight. So once we get it, I think that's going to be good. We need to loosen up this nut up top. Now normally, I would tell you to put the impact on this, but because you have a wire coming through, obviously you can't do that. So I'm gonna go grab the size, and I'm gonna grab something to hold this center section as well. So you can see that I've got a pair of vice grips on this side. And the reason I'm using those is it's easier to hold these, not have to worry about them loosening up. And it's an 18 on the top. Holy cow, is it snug. This is what I was afraid of. There we go. And guys, I don't know if you're dealing with, these have been replaced. Remember I said, if you're dealing with some that haven't been replaced, you may have to coat these in like WD-40 or something. Otherwise, you're gonna have a really hard time getting them off there. And I've got enough, just enough pressure off of it. It may pop off. Like you may see it shoot back a little bit. See, I'm running into these now. Move them down a little. It's getting close. There we go. All right, this should thread up. I don't know how it's gonna come off this end here, because this doesn't, I don't believe this comes apart, but maybe, oh, it does. So we can thread this up, but yeah. All right, so we're gonna have to figure out how this comes apart. This must have, it's got a little snap together ring here. We're gonna have to take that apart, and hopefully this pulls out of here so we can get this piece out of it. Now I'm gonna try without breaking this to pick this open. That is a tight fit, guys. I have to get it up closer. May not be able to show you guys me getting the clip off. Holy cow, that's a tight fit. I can honestly say I've never taken one of these off before, so there we go. I'm not real sure. I wonder if the bolt comes on it from the factory. Yeah, I don't know about that. We're gonna have to figure out something, because this doesn't just come apart. It's in the shock. Huh. All right, I'm gonna have to do a little research here, guys, and figure out how this thing either comes apart. Maybe you have to pull the wires out of it. Oh, you do. Okay, there we go. So we just pull the wires out. Interesting. Then once we pull the wires out, maybe we can get our little clip apart here and that'll work. What a wild design. I'm trying to be careful because I don't want to break it. Yeah, I need a flat blade screwdriver and we'll be able to pop this apart and pull this out. So hopefully you guys can see this little clip that goes in the end and then the plug that we pulled our wires out of. I guess that that's common maybe. Because now we can get our nut off the top. I'm just gonna kind of set this stuff to the side. And remember, it's best if you stack this stuff up as you go. Here, let me move you down here a little bit. You can see my stack of stuff right here. Got the nut, put it upside down. Then we've got the center piece. We're gonna hang it upside down as well. Sounds like there's a washer in there. Don't know that this has been reassembled correctly. And then we need to pull this whole thing off. So we'll leave that right there. And then we need to knock this off, which actually, I'm assuming, yeah, it's been off. That's interesting. Supposedly these are replaced, but I noticed there's a little bit of, see that on my hand? Hopefully they're not leaking. But let's go grab the new piece and then see if we can put it back together. I'm just gonna wipe this off a little bit, but I wanna show you guys the difference here. So here's where normally this thing would set, all right? So right about there. I'm gonna keep my hand there. We're gonna pull this off and you're gonna see how much lower this one's gonna set. See, I'm pushing I gotta move my hand now. Look at that. So quite a bit lower. And then remember, I'm going to be getting a 1-inch drop. If we use no spacers, you get 2 inches. You use no spacers, 2 inches, 1 spacer, 1.5 inches, 2 spacers, you should get 1 inch. Now, I am going to reuse this little spring holder. That just helps to keep the noise down. And so what you should be left with, essentially, all that's left would be the piece that we took off, the old hat. Now all we need to do is I'm gonna put this cap back on. That's kind of to keep dirt and debris out of the top of the strut. And the instructions will tell you that you need to knock this off, guys. But I'm guessing because, assuming these have been replaced, that's why they came apart so easy. And now we need to put the spring back on, which might be kind of tough with the wires. No, not as bad as I thought. Got the spring on, and then we need to just reverse the process here. I do not know what that, I'm gonna have to take that apart and see what that noise is. I'm assuming there's a washer in here. Oh, there is. I wanna make sure that we line up with that though. So we'll put the bump stop back in, make sure that we're lined up with that washer. I don't want to get that rattling noise in the car, not have that washer lined up. Actually, I can tell you what, we'll do it this way. We'll put this on. Sorry guys, I know I'm moving the camera on you. We'll put this on first. This may be easier to do it this way anyway. push that down. Then we'll try to thread through. There's actually 2 washers in there. No way we'd have threaded through those, turning that thing upside down. Should keep things in place. Now we just need to get this thing set back on, and it should line up a certain direction, guys. Generally, your opening for your spring is in the front, but I noticed when this thing was taken apart that it wasn't that way. Probably should have marked it. There's little studs that line up on the top though that should get you where you need to be. And when I say studs, look right here. If I pull this up, you see this stud right here? Those should line up in a hole in these little openings up top. I'm gonna try to show you guys, see those little pieces of plastic that lined up in the holes on the top of the strut hat here. So now we can go back together. Throw a washer up top. And then the nut on top of that. I'm gonna go ahead and snug this thing down as tight as we can get it. And then once I do that, then we'll put that pin back together on the top. Now that I've got that tight up top, we're gonna go ahead and knock this thing off. Once we have that strut tool off, all we need to do, guys, is just reverse the process. So these 2 little pins that we unplugged, we need to plug back in, but we need to put this guy around it. Actually, that could go on last. So let's plug these back in, and I do not know if these are side specific. We're gonna find out if we have a suspension issue or suspension error when we put it back together. Then we'll know that it had to go in a certain way. Probably should have taken note of that when I pulled it apart. Tell you what I may do, I may go do the other one real quick and make sure I really don't think it's side specific. We're gonna say it's not. Now we need to put our little clip back on, sandwiches around this whole thing, and we are good to go back in. To get it back in, we should be able to come in the middle here, thread this thing up this way. Trying to get between all our stuff. Push your pigtail up through. And then I like to push the A-arm down to get it to set on top of that, give you a little relief while you're putting it in the top. It only goes in one way, guys. At least it only lines up one way. I think I've got it. So we'll go ahead and thread a couple, loosely thread some 18s up top and get them started. You can see I have the strut out again. And the reason why, guys, is because normally once you get it up in place, you can turn this bottom section and get it where you need it. I could not turn it. So what I had to do was line it up with the way it's supposed to go in. So at the top of this, you can see this right here. that is the out-facing bolt that you see up top. See that line right there? I made this bottom piece parallel with that. So normally, like I said, you can just put something in there and spin it, or even grab the bottom of the strut and spin it, but it was not happening. So if I had a different set of spring compressors or strut compressors, I could probably have done that in the car, but I don't. So that's why I want a new set. Either way, now we're gonna put it back up again and hopefully get it lined up. So I got the 215 started at the bottom. A lot of times these clips fall off, guys, so if they do, just put them back on. Thread the 15s, don't snug them down, just get them, or don't tighten them up or torque them yet. Just get them, you know, somewhat in there and kind of hand tight. I'm gonna do the same thing up top with the 18, so the 3 18-inch nuts that go on the top, I'm gonna go ahead and just get those somewhat snug, and then we'll go ahead and continue reassembly. We'll torque everything once we have the suspension loaded. So I got those top ones snug. Now remember, when we lowered this initially, we had to trim off this upper ball joint. So we can see here that it's longer, but it's not a lot, guys, and I don't necessarily know that we need to trim it. What I do know is you have to start this bolt with kind of this all going together at one time. So what I'm gonna try to do is not trim it. I'm gonna see how far we can get in here. Another reason why I didn't tighten up this upper, for a couple reasons. One is you want to do it, obviously, like I said, with the suspension loaded, but another reason is you have to, you really need some drop on that in order to get this started. You can see I've got this push down in here, and this is tough. This is where a two-wheel drive is way more fun to work on. You don't have to deal with this. So we're gonna kind of thread it down. I've got it started. I'm gonna thread it down with the 18 and see how much room we have. I'll pull the camera off in a second and show you guys, and we'll see if we have to actually pull it back apart and trim it. I am definitely gonna have to trim. Check that out. We're already running into the boot. So I'm gonna pull it back apart, mark it off. Looks like the bottom, I don't know, maybe 1 or 2 threads we're gonna have to trim off. I figured that would be the case, but I thought maybe I'd get lucky. So let's take it back apart. You can see I've got it clamped because my ball joint was spinning. So I'm gonna run that back off. Sometimes if you clamp those two together, the upper A-arm and the spindle, it'll keep that ball joint from spinning. But either way, we need to take it back apart and get that trimmed off. So you can see we got it back apart. I've threaded this up where if I'm looking from the front here, 1, 2, 3 threads are showing. We're gonna trim it off even with the bottom of this right here. I'm just gonna use a cutoff wheel on my grinder real quick. I'm not even gonna show you guys that because it throws a bunch of sparks this way, and that should be good enough. I'm putting this bolt on there as a thread chaser when we come back off. That way we don't have any boogered up threads. So that's why I'm doing what I'm doing. And then maybe we can go back together. You can see we got that thing knocked off. Now we just need to thread this off, and then we will try again. Guys, this sucks. I mean, it sucks when you have to cut a brand new ball joint, but hey, look, it's the price you pay to be low, right? So either way, we're gonna stab it back in there. This is a little warm, and you can see I got into the bottom of that a little bit, but that's fine. Let's try it. Woo, that's close. Check that out, but not hitting. That's what we want. So now we can finish the reassembly process, which means need to go ahead and get the tie rod in. And actually, let's just do that right now. Go ahead and put the bolt on it. And then, guys, really what I think I'll do is we will get all this stuff snugged up. So remember, we didn't loosen the bottom ball joint. We need to go ahead and snug up everything. I've got this pretty snug. I don't have it torqued, but I do have it snug. Same way with the top. And then I've got my jack here with the block. We're gonna lift this suspension up, put some weight on it, and we're gonna go through and torque everything before we put the brakes back on. Now you can see we've got the suspension lifted up. And so what I wanna do, the outer tie rod nut down here, we need to torque to 44 foot-pounds. The center here, I'm just gonna snug that up with my impact because that really needs to be tightened once we get the truck on the ground. So we'll leave the center cap out and torque it last, but I am going to go ahead and run it down with my impact. It goes to 177. Other than that, guys, the top of the struts, so the very top of the strut should be 37 foot-pounds. So I was a little off there. I thought it was 18 on the top, but it's 37 on the top and the bottom. So the 15 on the bottom that hold the strut in, and the 18s on top. And then other than that, if you loosen the lower ball joint, it's 92. If you loosen the upper one like we did here, it's 37. So in my opinion, guys, this is the easiest way to get that strut in and out, is to loosen the upper ball joint at least. But now you know the torque specs. We're gonna go ahead and torque all this stuff down since we got the suspension up. The other thing we're gonna do is we're gonna use a 21 millimeter to spin these guys back into place. Remember, we put the marks on those. Once we get those put to the marking point, the torque for that is 140 foot-pounds. So I know that's a lot, and that's on the nut here, not on the inner. So you need to put 140 on the outside, but that should keep things in place. And then we will set it back down and keep reassembling, like the brakes. And I really, before I put the inner fender liner in, I want to turn the truck on and make sure that we don't have any errors. Like if I got that, the lines that we pulled out of the inside of the strut, that wiring harness, I want to make sure that they don't need to be reversed and we don't have any errors. Well, at this point, guys, we've got everything torqued that needs to be torqued, including lining up those upper marks that we had. Like I said, we're just trying to get it close. We're still going to go get an alignment, but either way, we need to go ahead and start reassembling some of this stuff. I'll tell you what, we'll just start with the brake. We really need to do brakes at some point soon on this. So maybe that's a video coming up. They're not completely toast, but the pads are getting pretty thin, in my opinion. So we'll get this just hand tight with the T30. Guys, I want to say it's like 106 inch-pounds if you want to get technical. And then we'll swing our bracket up here, and we'll talk about torque specs on the brakes. Got the brake up here. So we need to tighten the bracket, not the caliper, but the bracket that goes to the spindle. We need to torque it to 170. That's a lot. I think I said 144 in the video where I originally lowered it, and I didn't have any issues and they were really snug. And then these go to 74, the 19 millimeters. So we're gonna go ahead and get those torqued. And I think for now, I'm gonna go ahead, plug all our stuff back in. So our ABS line that we had, we unplugged with the 10 millimeter up top here. I want to put that 10 in, 106 inch-pounds there, 106 inch-pounds on this guy that holds the brake line and your ride height sensor. I'm hoping we don't have to mess with that. And then other than that, guys, I'm going to go ahead and plug the top plug in for the strut. Remember, that came out of the center of the strut. And so all that stuff will be plugged back in and hooked up. I'm going to go over and do the other side, and then we'll come back and we will do the sway bar end link, because you need that sway bar. You kind of need both sides loose in order to get it back together. So that's the plan. And then what we will do is we'll key it up and make sure that we don't have any errors, like I said, before we go reassembling the entire thing. Now that we have the other side done, I went ahead and put this guy in place. And guys, generally how I tighten these down is I tighten them down until the center won't spin. So you can see how the center will spin. So that's how I've always tightened them down. I did clean up the bolt, so I am reusing the original ones. The bushings still look good. And other than that, like I said, I guess when I went over the other side, I didn't do this stuff, but we need to go ahead and hook all our electronics back up. And then, like I said, we'll key it up and make sure we don't have any issues as far as lights. Both sides finished. I don't have the wheels on. Obviously, I don't have the fender wells on. But I want to test it to make sure we don't have to tear that wiring apart. The other side, I remembered which went where. I should have done that on this side too. But I want to start this thing up and see. There is another thing I want to show you guys too, though. We'll see here real quick. Nope, I got a hood open, but that's the only error I have. Okay, perfect. So now that we know that we're good. We can go ahead and put the fender wells back in and the tires back on. Just going to be doing those 7mm and those T15s. But what I was going to show you guys is, and this is why I do all my own work, because you can't trust anybody. Like, this came from a GM dealer. They replaced the struts, the front struts they said were bad when I bought this thing. It had not went through service. I don't know if you guys look back in that video when I bought this thing, but I drove 4 hours and it wasn't ready. They actually delivered it to me. But on the other side, this little piece of plastic that I put on top of the rings, it is not there. And that's just goes to show you what kind of job they do. It's all about how fast we can get things done. It's not about quality of work. And look, guys, I'm not saying that every GM dealer is like that, but this is pretty crappy work to leave that out. You can see I don't have it. And so what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna run without it. And it's also missing a washer on the inside. So luckily I had one of those top washers that went in between the top of the strut and those ones that were making noise on the other side. But yeah, that's why I do all of my own stuff. So anyway, now that we know we don't have any lights, we got everything plugged in, everything torqued down. Let's get the wheels back on, get the inner fender liners back in, and set this thing on the ground. Also, actually, one more thing before I cut off here and do this. Leave the center cap out of the wheel because we need to torque this once it's sitting on the ground, okay? So don't forget to do that. Now we've got the wheels back on, we've got the inner fender liners back on, obviously. It's set down on the ground. Now guys, while it is a little bit lower, I don't think we're gonna get the full effect until I take it out and drive it, and so we'll do that here in just a minute. But either way, make sure that you leave those center caps out. We need to torque that center nut to 177 foot-pounds. Obviously, you need to torque your wheels if you took them off to 140 foot-pounds. So that is why my center cap is off. I'm getting ready to torque those down, as well as the wheels. Make sure you do that on both sides, and you can put your center cap back in. And then guys, I'm probably gonna clean this thing up before I show you around it. And then obviously driving it up and down the road a little bit, because when we set it down, the wheels are they're kind of setting at an angle, so it's not gonna get the full amount of drop. But it's probably about, I did measure it just a second ago, it's about a 1/4 to a 1/2 inch lower than what it was, which is perfect. But I want to get it cleaned up, get it outside, drive it down the road, and see where it's going to kind of settle out at. So guys, sorry if you're going to get some wind noise, but it's kind of breezy. I'm trying to stay over here on the side of the house where maybe we don't get as much. But we're all finished up. So we're back from the alignment shop. Everything is perfect. So no issues getting it into spec as far as alignment goes. As a matter of fact, it was a little easier for him this time. And I think probably because I cleaned those bolts out, which didn't make a whole lot of sense because the bolts didn't look that bad. But now we got new upper A-arms, new bushings, obviously new ball joints up top. Everything else seemed fine. And for those guys that were waiting for me to do this, yes, this does work. There is no difference between the 4-wheel drive and the 2-wheel drive front strut other than the CV shaft. That's where I thought we may have some issues, but I think we could even go lower if we wanted to. The problem is, to keep mag ride in the back, there's just no good way to go past the 4.5 inch mark. Unless you had a custom set of relocation brackets for the shocks made. The front we could go lower, the back really not an option because those shocks are almost to the point where they're maxed out as far as being compressed. But like I said, guys, we went down almost an inch in the front, almost on the nose an inch, which puts a 1/2 inch rake towards the front. And then like I had explained before, because the roof line of this tapers off, even when it's level, it looked like it was lower in the back, and I just hated that look. And then my airbags, or the factory mag ride struts in the back, do have the air assist, so it would deflate and it'd look even worse. So either way, I'm really happy with it. It looks exactly, it's a 1/2 inch lower in the front than it is in the back now, which is perfect. That's exactly what I wanted. And like I said, for all those guys that were out there waiting for me to try this on a 4-wheel drive to see if it worked, it does. So you could technically use this in place of a drop spindle. If you're only gonna go 2 inches, in my opinion, guys, use the drop spindle, because that is a better way to get things lowered. I'm always gonna choose a drop spindle over any kind of spring or strut drop for alignment reasons. But let me know if you guys enjoyed this video. Like I said, I was excited to get this thing exactly how I want it to set. It's perfect now. Now, would I like to go an inch all the way around lower? Yes, but it is 4-wheel drive. And look, no issues as far as like the 4-wheel drive working or anything like that. But yeah, I mean, look, I'm a lower guy, right? So everything's lowered, and I would like to see it an inch lower, but hey, we're gonna live with it like this. But if you guys did enjoy this video, please, like always, smash that thumbs up button. Guys, if you are not subscribed, please go down there, hit that subscribe button. Of course, ring the bell icon that notifies you every single time we drop a new video, and stay tuned to see what we work on next.